Death Valley earned its name for a reason. Nothing survives here without water. But this dog had been left to die, with neither food nor hope. She saved a starving dog from certain death. 3 days later, he led her to a fortune. But his secret was worth killing for.
Death Valley earned its name for good reason back in 1882. The sun burned everything it touched without mercy or hesitation. Water was more valuable than gold in this cursed place. The ground cracked like old leather under the relentless heat daily. Few things survived here for very long at all. Plants were sparse and mostly dead or dying slowly. Animals knew better than to venture here during summer months. But humans were different and often foolish. Humans were stubborn and greedy and came searching for silver. They came searching for gold in the mountains nearby. They died searching for dreams that would never come true. The valley was littered with their bones and broken dreams. Wagon wheels stuck in sand forever. Tools rusted in the unforgiving sun. Graves marked with wooden crosses that fell over eventually. This was a place where hope came to die alone. But sometimes, just sometimes, miracles happened here too, unexpectedly. This is the story of one such miracle.
Sarah Chen was not like other women in 1882. She was Chinese-American and proud of her heritage, always. She was a photographer, traveling alone across the West, fearlessly. Her father had taught her the craft before he died. Now she documented the frontier for Eastern newspapers and magazines. She had photographed gold miners and cowboys and native tribes. She had captured images of ghost towns and vast landscapes. Her work was gaining recognition back east, slowly but surely. But she wanted something more meaningful and powerful for her portfolio. She wanted to capture the harshness of Death Valley itself, to show people what true desolation looked like in photographs. So she hired a guide named Tom in the nearest town. They packed supplies for a week-long expedition into the valley. 2 horses, 3 canteens, dried food, and her camera equipment. Tom warned her repeatedly about the dangers ahead of them. "Death Valley don't forgive mistakes, Miss Chen," he said seriously. "You sure about this trip?" Sarah just smiled with determination. She had faced danger before and survived it.
They had been traveling for 3 days into the valley. The heat was unbearable even in early morning hours now. Sarah's lips were cracked, despite drinking water regularly throughout the day. Tom looked worried, but said nothing about turning back yet. They were deep in the valley now, far from civilization. Sarah had taken dozens of photographs of the stark landscape, cracked earth stretching for miles, bleached bones from animals long dead, abandoned mining equipment rusting away slowly in the sun, salt flats that stretched forever toward distant mountains on the horizon. It was beautiful in a terrible and haunting way somehow. On the 4th morning, Tom's horse went lame suddenly and unexpectedly. "Stepped in a crack," Tom said while examining the leg carefully. "Can't ride him anymore for a while at least." This was bad news, very bad news for both of them actually. They couldn't leave the horse behind to die here alone, but they couldn't stay here either without enough water for 3. Sarah made a decision quickly and firmly. "We'll walk," she said. "Lead both horses and ration the water more carefully than before."
That afternoon, Sarah saw something moving in the distance ahead. At first, she thought it was a mirage playing tricks. The desert played tricks on your eyes constantly out here. But then she saw it again. Definitely something moving slowly. "Tom, do you see that?" she asked while pointing ahead. Tom squinted into the bright sun and nodded slowly. "Something's out there, all right. Probably a coyote or maybe a wolf. They approached carefully and cautiously across the hot sand and rocks. What they found made Sarah gasp out loud in shock. A dog lay collapsed in the shade of a large rock. The animal was a German shepherd, or had been once. Now it was barely recognizable as any breed at all. The dog was nothing but bones covered in matted, dirty fur. Its ribs showed through like a skeleton already dead. Its tongue hung out, swollen and blackened from severe dehydration. Flies covered its face, and the dog couldn't even move. Sarah had never seen an animal in such terrible condition before. "Poor thing's almost gone," Tom said, quietly and sadly with resignation. "Best to leave it be, Miss Chen. Nature taking its course."
But Sarah couldn't just walk away from this suffering creature now. She knelt down beside the dog, carefully and gently. "Hey there," she whispered softly to the dying animal. The dog's eyes opened slightly at the sound of her voice. They were brown eyes, clouded with pain and near death. But there was still something alive in those eyes somehow, a spark of will to survive against all impossible odds. Sarah grabbed her canteen without hesitation at all now. She poured water into her hand, slowly and carefully. The dog lapped it up desperately with its swollen tongue. "Sarah, we can't spare the water!" Tom protested firmly and loudly. "We barely have enough for ourselves and the horses already!" Sarah ignored him completely and continued. She kept giving the dog water, little by little, carefully. "How did you get out here?" she asked the animal. The dog had no collar, no identification at all visible, no supplies or gear anywhere nearby that she could see. Tom walked around the area, searching for clues to explain this. He found tracks in the sand leading from the north direction, human boot prints and dog paw prints together at first, then only dog prints continuing alone to where they stood. "Someone was with this dog," Tom called out to Sarah. "Left him behind about a mile back by the looks." Sarah felt anger rising in her chest like fire burning. "They abandoned him out here in Death Valley deliberately?" Tom nodded grimly and spat on the ground. "Looks that way to me, clearly. Probably running low on supplies themselves. Dog was slowing them down or eating too much food." This was beyond cruel in Sarah's mind completely. This was murder, plain and simple. Murder of an innocent animal. The dog looked at her with those clouded brown eyes, like he was asking her not to abandon him too, like he was begging for one more chance at life. Sarah made her decision right then and there, forever. "We're taking him with us," she announced firmly to Tom. Tom shook his head in disbelief at her decision completely. "Miss Chen, that dog can't walk at all. He's half dead already now. We don't have enough water for him and us both." Sarah stood up and faced Tom directly, with complete determination. "Then we ration better. We find water sooner, but we're not leaving him here to die alone."
Tom looked at her stubborn face and sighed heavily with resignation. He knew that look well enough by now. She wouldn't be convinced otherwise, no matter what he said. "You're risking both our lives for a dying dog," he said. "I hope you know that for certain, Miss Chen." Sarah nodded without hesitation at all whatsoever. "I know, but I can't live with myself if we leave him." She carefully lifted the dog in her strong arms gently. He was so light, weighing almost nothing at all, just bones and fur and fading life somehow clinging on. She wrapped him in her spare blanket for shade and protection. Tom helped her secure the dog on the lame horse carefully. They started traveling again, but slower now than before. Sarah walked beside the horse, checking on the dog constantly. She gave him water every 30 minutes like clockwork. The dog drank each time, but remained very weak still. As evening approached, Tom found a small canyon with shade. "We'll camp here tonight," he said while dismounting his horse. Sarah carefully took the dog down and laid him gently. But what Sarah didn't know yet was this important truth. This dog wasn't just any abandoned animal left to die.
This dog belonged to a prospector named Bill Hayes recently. Hayes had found something in these mountains just days ago, something that would make him rich beyond his wildest dreams. A massive silver vein worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The dog had been with him when he made the discovery. Hayes had marked the location carefully in his mind and notes. But then Hayes got greedy and paranoid about his find. He decided the dog was a liability and witness somehow. So he abandoned the dog in the desert deliberately and cruelly, left him to die with no water or food. But the dog knew the way to the silver vein. The location was burned into his memory from countless trips there, and now Sarah had saved him from certain death. She had just become the key to finding lost treasure, and she had just painted a target on her back. Hayes would come looking for his dog eventually. Sarah examined the dog more closely in the better evening light. The dog had old scars across his back and legs. Someone had beaten him regularly over a long period of time. There were also rope burns around his neck from being tied. This dog had suffered for months before being abandoned here. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes unexpectedly now. "What did they do to you?" she whispered gently. The dog just looked at her with those trusting brown eyes that were already becoming clearer with the water he received. Sarah mixed some of their dried beef with water carefully. She made a thin soup the dog could swallow easier. The dog ate slowly, but eagerly and gratefully, like he couldn't believe food actually existed anymore for him. Tom built a small fire as the sun began setting. The temperature would drop dramatically once darkness fell completely here. Sarah sat beside the dog, stroking his matted fur gently. "You need a name," she said thoughtfully to him. "How about Survivor, because that's what you are, boy." The dog's tail thumped weakly against the ground once. Sarah smiled at that small sign of life returning.
Tom watched them from across the fire with growing concern. "We need to find water tomorrow," he said seriously and firmly. "Our supply is running low faster than I planned." Sarah nodded in understanding of the situation they faced. "How far to the nearest water source from here?" Tom pulled out his worn map and studied it carefully. "There's supposed to be a spring about 8 miles northeast, but I've never been there myself personally to confirm." Sarah looked at Survivor lying beside her peacefully now. The dog was breathing easier than before already. His eyes were closed, but he seemed more comfortable. She had made the right decision saving him, she knew, even if it put them all in more danger. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep very well at all. She kept checking on Survivor every hour throughout the darkness. The dog slept fitfully, whimpering sometimes in troubled dreams probably. Sarah wondered what nightmares haunted this poor animal's mind. What had he seen out here in the valley? What had he endured from his cruel owner recently?
Around midnight, Survivor suddenly woke up with a start, unexpectedly. He looked around frantically, disoriented and confused by his surroundings. Sarah reached out to calm him gently and quietly. "It's okay, boy. You're safe now with me, I promise." Survivor looked at her and seemed to understand her words. He laid his head on her lap and closed his eyes. Sarah stroked his head until he fell asleep again, peacefully. Tom was awake and watching from his bedroll nearby. "That dog trusts you already," he observed quietly and thoughtfully. "I've never seen an animal bond so fast before." Sarah smiled in the darkness at his words. "Maybe he knows I won't abandon him like the others." Morning came with brutal heat already building, even at dawn. Sarah woke to find Survivor sitting up on his own. His eyes were much clearer now and more alert than yesterday. He even wagged his tail slightly when he saw her. "Look at you," Sarah said with genuine happiness and surprise. "You're stronger already, aren't you?" She gave him more water and food immediately.
Survivor ate with better appetite than the night before clearly. Tom was packing up their camp efficiently and quickly. "We need to move soon," he said urgently. "Find that spring before the heat gets worse today." Sarah helped Survivor stand up slowly and very carefully.
The dog was wobbly, but could stand on his own. He even took a few shaky steps forward alone. "You're a fighter," Sarah told him with admiration and respect. They started traveling northeast toward the spring location on the map. Survivor walked beside Sarah's horse at first with determination, but after an hour, he began to tire visibly. Sarah stopped and lifted him onto the horse again. "Rest now, boy," she said gently. "You've done enough walking for today already." They continued through the increasingly hot morning slowly. The sun climbed higher and the temperature rose rapidly. Sarah's throat was dry despite rationing water carefully. Tom looked worried, but said nothing about their situation. After 2 more hours of walking, Survivor suddenly became alert. His ears perked up, and he stared toward the east. Sarah noticed his strange behavior immediately and stopped her horse. "What is it, boy?" she asked the dog gently. Survivor began trying to jump down from the horse. Sarah helped him down carefully to the ground. The dog immediately started walking east, away from their route. He looked back at Sarah and whined softly but urgently. "Tom, the dog wants us to go that way," Sarah said. Tom frowned at the suggestion immediately and firmly. "That's not where the spring is, according to the map." But Survivor was insistent and determined about this direction. He took a few more steps east and looked back, like he was trying to lead them somewhere specific and important. Sarah trusted her instincts about this suddenly and completely. "Let's follow him," she decided quickly without hesitation. Tom protested strongly against this decision. "Miss Chen, we can't follow a half-dead dog into the desert. We need that spring water desperately now." But Sarah was already turning her horse east to follow. "He knows something we don't, Tom. I can feel it." Tom grumbled but followed behind them reluctantly and unhappily. They followed Survivor for nearly an hour through rough terrain. The dog moved with growing strength and determination despite his condition. He seemed to know exactly where he was going. Sarah had never seen anything like this before in her life. The dog had a purpose and mission now clearly. Finally, Survivor stopped at the base of a rocky outcropping. He barked once, loud and clear into the still air. Then he pawed at the ground insistently and repeatedly with urgency. Sarah dismounted and walked over to where he was digging. "What did you find, boy?" she asked with curiosity building. They both looked down at what Survivor had uncovered carefully. What they saw made Tom gasp out loud in shock. Silver ore exposed in the rock formation. Veins of pure silver running deep into the outcropping. More silver than either of them had ever seen before. Sarah knelt down and examined the silver vein more closely. It was massive, running deep into the rock. Clearly, this was worth a fortune, maybe hundreds of thousands of dollars. "How did the dog know?" Tom asked in amazement and disbelief. Sarah looked at Survivor with new understanding forming in her mind. "He's been here before," she said slowly and thoughtfully. "Whoever abandoned him must have found this silver first." Tom's eyes widened as he understood the terrible implications now. They left the dog to die so he couldn't lead anyone else here? Sarah felt sick to her stomach at the realization. Someone had tried to murder this loyal dog to protect greed. Survivor sat beside Sarah and looked up at her proudly, like he was saying, "I trusted you, now see this."
Sarah hugged the dog gently around his thin neck carefully. "You're not just a survivor," she whispered to him emotionally. "You're a hero, boy." Tom was already examining the area for more deposits. "This is huge, Miss Chen. This could be one of the biggest strikes in years." But Sarah wasn't thinking about the money or silver right now. She was thinking about Survivor and what to do next. "We need to stake a claim," Tom continued excitedly and urgently. "Register it before someone else finds it first." Sarah nodded, but her mind was elsewhere entirely now. Survivor had given them this incredible gift of trust. He had trusted her enough to share his secret location. The dog could have kept walking and never shown them, but he had chosen to trust her with this information.
"The dog gets a share," Sarah announced suddenly and very firmly. Tom looked at her like she was crazy. Completely. A dog can't own a mining claim legally, Miss Chen.
Sarah stood up and faced Tom directly without backing down. "Then I'll hold his share in trust for him permanently. He found this silver, not us at all." Tom shook his head but didn't argue further with her. He knew Sarah well enough by now to know when she made up her mind, nothing could change it. They spent the next hour examining the silver vein carefully. Tom estimated it was worth at least $300,000, maybe more depending on how deep it went into rock. This was life-changing money for both of them completely. Sarah took photographs of the silver deposit from multiple angles. She would need evidence of their discovery for the claim. Survivor lay in the shade, watching them work patiently. He seemed content now that he had shown them his secret, like a burden had been lifted from his shoulders finally. Sarah gave him more water and the last of their beef. "You deserve it, boy," she said warmly to him. As the sun began setting, Tom suggested they camp here. "We should guard the silver tonight," he said seriously, "in case anyone else comes around looking for it." Sarah agreed, and they set up camp near the outcropping. She made a bed for Survivor in the shade. The dog was exhausted from the day's journey and excitement. He fell asleep quickly after eating and drinking well. Sarah sat beside the fire, thinking about everything that happened. Just yesterday morning, this dog was dying in the sand. Now he had led them to a fortune beyond imagination. It seemed like a miracle, an impossible stroke of luck. But Sarah didn't believe in luck or coincidence, really. She believed Survivor had chosen to trust her specifically. He could have died, keeping his secret buried forever. Instead, he had shared it with the woman who saved him. That meant something profound to Sarah deep inside. Around midnight, Survivor suddenly woke up and growled low. Sarah was immediately alert and reached for her rifle. "What is it, boy?" she whispered quietly to him. Tom woke up and grabbed his gun as well. They heard voices in the distance approaching their camp. "Someone's out there," Tom whispered urgently to Sarah. "Could be the man who abandoned the dog originally." Sarah's heart raced as she realized the danger they faced. If the dog's original owner found them here, he would know. He would know Survivor had led them to his silver. The voices grew closer, and Sarah could make out words. "I'm telling you, Bill, that dog is dead by now." A second voice responded, rougher and angrier than the first. "He better be dead, if anyone finds that silver vein." The voice trailed off ominously and threateningly. Sarah looked at Tom with wide eyes of fear. These were dangerous men approaching their camp in darkness. Survivor's growl grew louder and more aggressive than before. Sarah put her hand on his head to quiet him. "Shh, boy, stay quiet," she whispered desperately to him. But it was too late now to hide completely. The men had heard Survivor's growl in the still night. "What was that?" the first voice asked with alarm. "Sounded like a dog," the second voice, Bill, said slowly. There was a long pause filled with terrible tension. Then Bill's voice came again, filled with rage and realization. "That's my dog. He's still alive somehow." Footsteps rushed toward their camp quickly and heavily. Sarah stood up with her rifle raised and ready. Tom did the same beside her with his gun. Two men emerged into the firelight suddenly and unexpectedly. One was tall and thin with a cruel face. The other was shorter, stocky, with dead eyes like a snake. Bill, the stocky one, stared at Survivor in shock. "You survived," he said with disbelief and anger mixed together. Survivor barked at Bill with pure hatred and defiance. Sarah had never heard such anger from the dog before. "That's far enough," Sarah said firmly while aiming her rifle. "This is our camp and our claim now." Bill laughed, a harsh sound without any humor whatsoever. "Your claim? That's my silver, lady. I found it first." Tom stepped forward beside Sarah protectively and ready. "You abandoned your dog to die in the desert. You lost your rights when you did that." Bill's face turned red with rage at those words. "That dog is my property legally, and so is the silver he found for me." Sarah felt anger boiling inside her chest like fire. "He's not property. He's a living being you tried to murder." Bill's hand moved toward his gun slowly and deliberately. The tall man beside him did the same, threateningly. "Hand over the dog and leave," Bill demanded coldly, "or we'll take him and the silver by force."
Sarah's finger tightened on the trigger of her rifle. She had never shot a man before in her life, but she would protect Survivor at any cost necessary. Tom was ready beside her, his gun steady and aimed. Survivor stood between them, still growling at Bill with fury. The tension was so thick you could cut it. Nobody moved for several long seconds of silence. Then something unexpected happened that changed everything completely. Survivor suddenly lunged forward at Bill with surprising speed. The dog's teeth sank into Bill's gun hand hard. Bill screamed and dropped his weapon in pain and shock. The tall man raised his gun toward Survivor immediately. But Tom fired first with a deafening crack in the night. The bullet hit the ground near the man's feet. "Next one goes through your chest," Tom said calmly. The tall man froze and dropped his gun quickly. Sarah kept her rifle aimed at both men steadily. "Get out of here now," she commanded with authority. "This claim is registered in my name and the dog's. You have no rights here anymore at all." Bill clutched his bleeding hand, glaring at them with pure hatred. "This isn't over," he spat venomously at them. "I'll be back with the sheriff and proper papers." Sarah smiled coldly at his threat. "Do that, and I'll tell the sheriff how you abandoned your dog to die. How you tried to claim jump our legal discovery. See how that works out for you, Bill." Bill and his companion backed away slowly into the darkness. Their footsteps faded into the night air gradually. Sarah lowered her rifle and knelt beside Survivor immediately. "Good boy," she said while hugging him tight. "You protected us, didn't you?" Survivor licked her face happily and proudly. Tom sat down heavily, his hands shaking from adrenaline. "That was too close, Miss Chen, way too close." Sarah nodded in agreement completely. "But we survived. We all survived together." She looked at Survivor with deep affection and gratitude. This dog had been starving and dying just 2 days ago. Now he had saved their lives and made them rich. He had proven that loyalty and trust mattered more than silver, more than anything money could buy in this world. Sarah made a silent promise to Survivor right then. She would never abandon him, no matter what happened next. They were partners now, forever in this life. And together, they would build something beautiful from this discovery. A new beginning for them both in the wild frontier.